Well, hey friends, and welcome to Pause. It's the heart of winter right now, and the beginning of the Lenten season, and so I kind of want to offer a reflection, but I do want to be fully honest here, and this is true of most messages, I think. But I'm offering a reflection that is one that I for sure need to hear, just for my own self. And so you're just going to be coming along with me on a ride here, and I obviously hope and pray that there is benefit for all of us. But we have in our backyard a Passiflora vine, and it's a few years old, probably 4 or 5 years old at this point. And like so many things and so many of our lives at the moment, this vine has been greatly trimmed back, and it looks nothing like it did in spring or summer or even towards the end of fall. It's like the innumerable leaves are gone. The cosmic purple flowers are, they're gone. They're nowhere to be found. And there's a chance, this feels this way every winter, but there's a chance that might just be true, that maybe that last frost was the one that did it in and knocked it out. And that maybe this is the end of the road for this vine. But there's also a chance that it's right on the verge of just bursting forth with new life. And all of this, whatever its fate is to be, it'll have to do with a timeline and a process that we can know a little bit about, but we have what can feel like a frustratingly small amount of control over, outside of our kind of participation with it. And this is true of the vine. It's true of our own lives also. Nature is remarkable and a helpful spiritual teacher if we start to tune our ears in. The Passiflora vine, like all plants, depending on how we want to approach it or look at it, can be sub-categorized and labeled kind of ad infinitum. Some of us really like that game of figuring out, what exactly is this thing and how many parts and pieces go to comprise what makes up this beautiful thing and makes it a whole. And I'm like that. I like to understand what it is and how it works and really what to call it. So just for instance, the Passiflora vine, I could tell you that it's called a passion vine or a passion flower in some regions, that it holds spiritual significance to the people of Spain and Portugal. They see something in the life of Jesus and its flowers. Its flowers are unbelievable. They look like they came from another planet. They also can be boiled and make a delicious tea with a little honey and maybe some hibiscus. It is a vine, and as such, it is made up of stems, roots, branches, leaves, buds, flowers, stamens, pistils, we could go on and on. And all these observations and categorizations and names and labels are objectively true. But we could also just call it a vine, and that would be equally as true. And we could also just see it. Just look at it for what it is and sit with it. And that may be ultimately and honestly the most enjoyable way to experience this plant, because this is something that anyone can do. There is a healing self-forgetfulness that can happen just in seeing something. Really seeing, when something just grabs you and you almost feel like you're made to take pause for a moment. That kind of seeing, however we want to call it, it actually has very little to do with the kind of like, what is it? And what do I call it? And what can I do with it? And how can I keep it? And how do I fix it? Like, these are all questions that come after the seeing. But there's this very healing kind of self-forgetfulness when we're struck by awe at something that is just simply beautiful. Jesus said in many different ways and at many different times, he would say things like, if you would forget yourself and instead look to me, that paradoxically what you'll find is not only me, but yourself as well. There's an old story by it's credited to the desert mothers and fathers of the 4th century, and it goes like this. One day, some locals from the city made the trek out to the desert, and they wanted an audience with the local monastic. And so they met him, and they asked him, "What does one do to seek union with God?" And the monastic answered them, and he said, "The harder you seek it, the more you experience God's absence." And they said, "Well, what do we do then with the feeling of absence?" And the monastic said, "Well, just understand it isn't there." And they said, "Does this mean that God and I are one?" And the monastic replied, "Well, like the singer in the song, like the wave and the ocean, like the vine and the branches, not one, but not two." About 1,000 years after that, a guy called John of the Cross made this profound statement, and it's sort of jarring in its simplicity. But he said, "God is your center. At the center of our being is God." Now, out here on the kind of reactive edge of our own life, where there's all this input and all this noise and media and decisions and all this stimulation and all of these kind of what if scenarios that are playing, and if this happens, what then? And will I or won't I, or should I or shouldn't I, or did you hear that they? Out here on the kind of reactive edge of ourself are realities that present and come at us at such a rapid pace that life is just moving and changing, and we're adapting and reacting and thinking and categorizing and labeling, and how does this fit, and who's in and what's out, and how, and these are all realities that they're real, and they're here for us to wrestle through and to draw conclusions, and to allow mystery to overwhelm us when it does. Realize that there are many things that have no answers. And then down below all of this, closer to the center of our being, is this source, is God, who the scriptures say does not change like shifting shadows, who Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, for all time. Down closer to the center of ourselves is God. And God is love. And Christ is God. And Christ is in us. And Christ is at rest, asleep in the boat at sea, seated at the right hand of God, at rest. And this is why the scripture, as Hebrews implores us to leverage everything to move into this experience of rest, to surrender, to give up, to break the patterns of disobedience and overreactivity that the writer of Hebrews says, essentially turned what should have been a 40-day trip into 40 years for Israel. To strive to enter the rest of God. To make every effort. And so, in this way, in this winter, at the end of an odd year, where everything around us, even in the natural world, seems to be saying something very similar, which is, slow down. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to look at what's coming up, rather than being lost with what's coming at. There's a little insulation that we have from that in the winter. Things aren't growing, things aren't moving. The world isn't spinning quite as madly as it normally does. And in this space, the invitation I sense in my own life is to make every effort to enter the rest of God. And to be a little bit like the vine in my backyard. That with an uncertain future, what can we do but trust the soil we've been planted in? Trust the gardener who placed us there. And participate in whatever way with a process we have very little control over the outcomes of, but nonetheless find ourselves in the middle of. And so, may God bless you, may God bless us, and may we sense this week, this moment, right now, the presence of the one who has promised to make all things new. Amen.